What is up, maniacs? I am Zach, and I am the Milly Maker Maniac. Welcome to our Week 4 DFS prep. We're going to walk game by game in this video, looking at matchup advantages and disadvantages, where we think there might be some opportunities for some big games, and start working towards creating our player pool. We take the grades between the matchups, and I take their grades against each other, and that helps me find some matchup advantages. So I'll take like the offensive passing grade versus the opposing defense's coverage grade and see if there's an advantage or disadvantage. In this game, we actually have an advantage for both teams. It's exactly the same. Interesting. But yeah, so use that to try to start finding some just skill advantages, team tendency advantages. Then from there, we'll start building on what's likely to happen as far as adjustments from coaches and things along those lines. That's one thing I try to be a lot more wary of than I feel the majority of fantasy football podcasts and content creators do. I think lots of times in the industry, we fall into this trap of seeing what happened last week and expecting that tendency to continue in the next week. I think it's important to understand that the opponent's coaches in the next week are watching that same film. They're seeing where the previous defense was exploited, and they're going to make adjustments to try to combat that. So that's why I don't like making huge bets on one individual player. I like it better on making bets on offenses that have a lot of weapons that each week could get there, so we can mix and match those across different lineups and be right on hitting that guy that seems kind of obscure, but we were on that offense, so we were buying shares of individual offenses and spreading those across our lineups. So let's jump into our first matchup of the week. We've got Atlanta versus Washington. Obviously, Atlanta was one of my favorites last week, and that did not play out at all. I don't want to give up on Atlanta. I think that, yes, they had a very bad week against a bad defense. That all looks very bad, but they have a very good advantage this week. One of the higher QB grades at 4 for the week. So I feel that there is bounce back potential here. They don't have a very good run grade, which I find interesting against Washington's D. If we zoom over and look at their actual grades here, we can see when we go into Washington on defense here, overall not great, but their run defense is exceptional, one of the better ones in the league. Below average on tackling, higher end on pass rush, but awful in coverage. So even though Atlanta is kind of middle of the pack in their passing game so far, the coverage grade is just so bad for Washington. I think it's a good bounce back. Actually, Atlanta's passing game is on the lower end of overall grades this year. It might actually be the lowest. Let's just see. It is indeed the lowest right now. And I don't, obviously Penix did not play well last week, but I think that they just had an off week, honestly. I think there's still potential there. See him make some confident throws that I think long term he's going to make more of. And, there's growing pains. It's his 6th or 7th NFL start, even though it is the Panthers. Like, this is a tough league. So I could see him bouncing back. They just have too much talent, and it's pretty easy to stack these players, like, as far as, like, we know who to grab out of this offense. Let's go back over here. We'll reset this. But I think this game also has, like, a decent chance of being more on the shootout side because Atlanta's defense grades better now than it has in the past, primarily because of their pass rush. So Washington still has Atlanta's actually showing a pretty big disadvantage with their defense against Washington here in the run game, and then just overall, they do have a little bit of a pass rush advantage versus Washington. So I think that this is a sneaky game that could hit the over, set at 45.5, which is right in that sweet spot. If those games hit the over, and we're heavy on those games, it can be a big win for us. Big advantage for Atlanta QB, even though they've been struggling. So that passing game we're interested in. Disadvantage in the run game, but that doesn't mean we're going to exclude Bijan out of our lineups because Bijan can have big games outside of the running game as well. So this is setting up more for like a Penix game than it is for Bijan having a big run game. But Bijan can still be a top 5 running back and not have a great day on the ground because he's getting so much work in the passing game. And when he does get work in the passing games, those are more likely to be games where Penix blows up, because he can dump one off to Robinson like he did in week 1 and turns it into a 50-yard touchdown, which is a huge boost to both of them, but gives us that chance of hitting the 303 that we pretty much have to have with Penix to have a shot with him in DraftKings because he's a pocket passer. So that's the type of scenario we're looking at. So I will build some Penix lineups. I won't be scared. I'll probably build somewhere between 5 to 10 Penix lineups, but I will be spreading Mooney and London and even some Kyle Pitts across all my lineups and make a bet on Atlanta again this week, a bet that I assume will be quite contrarian because of their performance last week, but I think this is a good spot for them to bounce back, get in the film room, find what they did wrong, and then have a positive advantage this week to make those adjustments with. So I think this could be Drake London smash spot. I'm hoping that that's not my preseason bias coming out from best ball season because I have a ton of London and was high on the Falcons in general. But I still think they just have so many good matchups the rest of the year that if Penix starts to find it, which I think he will, they're going to have some boom games that come out of nowhere. So want to be a part of that early rather than late. And then on the Washington side, this run grade is skewed by running quarterbacks. So we don't want to take too much into this as far as the running backs go. And this is split. So I don't really want to mess with the running backs, to be honest, because we have 3 different guys getting touches, and it's unlikely in an environment like that one of those guys becomes top 5. There's one of them will probably be top 15, but we're looking more for guys with top 5 potential. We can mix in some Debo. Need to find out about McLaurin's injury. Let's go over here to DraftKings and look at the pricing for this game. Let's see if there's any updates on Jaden Daniels. I'm assuming it's going to be Mariota this week. We'll keep an eye on that. If it's Mariota, we could have interest at 5K and building some lineups with him. Not a ton, but a few. But really focus on Bijan. I'm not really going to touch any other running backs in this game. Pricing at receivers is legit. Like Drake London, I'm going to have a ton of him. I'm going to have him all over the place. Mooney at 4,700. Give me all sorts of that. See what we find out about Terry here. Haven't heard anything, so we'll keep an eye on that. Right now, it's looking like primarily out of this game for me, it's going to be London, Mooney, and some Kyle Pitts. So yeah, on the Washington side, be looking primarily at Debo out of the receivers, and London and Mooney will be big smash spots for me. On Atlanta, keep an eye on McLaurin. If he plays, we'll mix him into our player pool as well. And then we can mix in both tight ends. Ertz feels a little high priced if it's not Daniels, but Pitts will definitely be mixing in as well. Again, I think Atlanta's going to give us leverage on the field. So if they do go off, we're in a good spot, and I think this is a good spot for their pass offense to bounce back. Not really interested in either defense. I think we'll find better spots. Commanders, maybe, especially after fading Carolina's D last week. That killed me. So let's move on to our next game. We got New Orleans and Buffalo. This game, huge advantage for Buffalo across the board. Our total game environment plus every position, they're a total of 19, which is by far our biggest offensive advantage. So this includes, like, I give advantages for high team point totals. So this Vegas and odds home field, like I give 2 points for it being a home game. If it's a total above 46.5, and if this is above 30, you get 3 points for that. So they get advantage for the game environment, biggest advantage for QB. They have advantage at every single position on offense. There's no disadvantage across the board. So they have a huge advantage this week across the board. But the one thing that we have to be looking for when we're playing DFS is really we need a team that is going to score a lot of fantasy points, and lots of times that requires the team to just score a lot of points in general. I think this game is a game that they probably get out to have a early lead and probably run away with it a little bit. So they'll probably slow down in the second half. It's not a great environment for Josh Allen, in my mind, to have a QB 1 week. And with his pricing, I won't build a ton of Josh Allen lineups just because I think he's very, I would say almost guaranteed to be top 10 this week. But I think it's pretty low likelihood that he's pushed enough in this game to have one of those QB 1 weeks where you have to have him where he scores 40 points. Even if he scores a 25-point game at his pricing, there's going to be other guys that are cheaper that achieve that same outcome this week. So he has to have one of those huge games in order to be needed. And I just don't think this is the environment for this. The guy I like out of this game more than anybody, I think, is going to be James Cook coming out of this. We'll pop over and look at pricing. But good advantage for the running game here. I think they're going to be in positions to score quite a bit. So it just feels more like a 31-3 type game. But I don't see it being one of those games where Josh Allen goes off, because it's not one of those games where he's really going to get pushed. He'll have a good game. It'll be a good NFL game, but I think it's unlikely that he has that boom game that we need in DFS. So I will play a few lineups with Josh just because he always has the opportunity to put up a 40 spot, but I'm not going to build a ton. Another thing about this Bills offense is it hasn't been very concentrated over the years. So it's hard to pick pieces off of this and have confidence in it. So yeah, I think more likely outcome is a game around that, and that's just not going to do it for us at his pricing. Let's go over wide receivers and see what targets we're looking like. Yeah, Keon, after a big week 1 with 11 targets, is leveled off on his targets. Khalil had 4 last week. Palmer with just 1. He's been kind of a disappointment so far. Elijah Moore's been on the field a little bit more. 3 targets. So spread around there. Let's see if any targets went to Cook. He had 3 targets. Kincaid had 6. So Kincaid's a piece we can take out of here for sure. So right now, to me, I would say the pieces that I would be taking off of the Buffalo side would be Kincaid, Coleman, maybe some Shakir, but really my main focus in this game will be James Cook. I'm not really interested in New Orleans. They do show a little bit of advantage in the run game. Actually a pretty big advantage. But I just don't see them moving the ball up and down the field, especially when they should be able to lock in on the run. The Buffalo pass grade has actually been pretty solid, which I find interesting after a bad week 1. Let's look at Buffalo's defensive metrics, see if it's just bad on bad or if it's good on good. Let's see. Run defense has been really bad. So it's more of medium on bad than bad on bad or good on good there. So middle of the road for New Orleans in the run game. Tackling for New Orleans really bad. Tackling for Bills pretty bad. Pass rush for the Bills is okay. Coverage is bad. So it's more of just the Bills defense not being great and New Orleans being bad to mediocre on the offensive side. Yeah. Pretty good on the run though. It's higher end. So I don't think I want to take anything from the New Orleans side of this game. I will play just Buffalo, and at the pricing where these guys are, Cook's at 71, that's plenty fair. He'll probably be my highest rostered running back. These guys are Keon Coleman at 56 is usable. Shakira is usable at 53. Beyond that, I don't really want to touch this. Maybe do a bring back with Shaheed or Olave, but I'm feeling more of just going Bills here. And we'll mix in Kincaid. Wish it wasn't a 4,500. Feels a little high, but we'll build in a little bit there. All right, let's move on to our next game. We got Detroit against Cleveland. So this is good on good here. This is an interesting one. Slight advantage at QB, actually a disadvantage at running back for the Lions, which you would not think. Really, it's a pretty neutral matchup in the pass game as well. The reality is Cleveland's defense is good. When we go and look at these grades, Cleveland D, 88. Great in pass rush. Solid in coverage. Yeah, like it's just a good defense. So we have good on good here. It is at home for Detroit, though, so that feels like a much different environment than what Cleveland had last week with being at home against Green Bay. Detroit's coming off a big win against Baltimore. Feels like they're pretty locked in, like they're getting a feel for the new offense without Ben Johnson. It's definitely not a smash spot. Like, it's not a spot that we want to be all over Detroit. But I think it's going to be a week that a lot of people are probably avoiding them because of what Cleveland's defense has done. So it gives us an opportunity to get onto a very good offense that a lot of people aren't going to be on. Detroit's an offense that, like, regardless of matchup, you still feel like there's a good chance that one of their core guys is top 5 or maybe even 2. And there's always a chance of, like, Jared Goff in week 2 made us a lot of money because we built some Jared Goff stacks, which wasn't seen at the time as a great matchup against the Bears. We're finding now that the Bears are definitely one of our biggest matchups in fantasy we want to pursue, playing that defense. But Baltimore is not a bad defense, and they just went off against Baltimore. So we'll have some lineups. Let's look at what it would be like to build Detroit lineup. Goff at 64. It's okay. Like to be a little cheaper against Cleveland, but it's okay. Gibbs at 7,700. Montgomery at 5,700. They'll be very low owned. Gibbs hasn't had a boom game really yet. Let's see what he scored last night. 27. So he had one last night. But he's just so damn good that the matchup doesn't really matter. So he's a guy I'll consider. Montgomery obviously had the big game last night, 32 points. Only on 12 carries, too. He had the big 76-yard run. That boosted those numbers quite a bit. I think that'll more than likely be his best game of the season, but he did look good. He looked explosive. They're two very good running backs, so we consider both these guys here and there, but definitely not core plays. Wide receiver, Amon-Ra and J-Mo. It's one of the nice things about playing Lions is the stacks are pretty straightforward. So what I think I'll do as I talk through it is I'll build somewhere between 5 and 10, like Lions stacks, like where Lions win this game 35-0 type scenarios. Like, I'm not going to mess with Cleveland at all. Like, their matchup stats just look horrible. Yeah, they're a -8 overall. So a lot of bad stuff going on for Cleveland. So I'm just not going to touch anything on their side. I'm not going to build any game stacks this game. I think this is likely to just be Detroit beating them up. Like, if this game is usable, it's likely going to be Detroit with a big win, like a 35-14 type environment. If this game isn't usable, I think it's probably just a low-scoring game. I think it's very unlikely that it's a shootout. So that's why I would just target just the Detroit side and not touch any of the Cleveland pieces. We'll just have Detroit players. I probably won't spread Detroit players across many of my other lineups. I will primarily just have them in the Lions have a big game lineups, but I won't spread them across the rest of my lineups because I don't think it's a great matchup here, but they're just an offense that I'm not going to fade completely in any given week because they are so explosive. Like I said, every single week they likely are going to have a positional player at top 5 at their position. So we always have to keep them in mind. All right, let's move on to Tennessee and Houston. There's really nothing here for me. I'm probably not going to touch this game at all. Tony Pollard had a good week last week, but he's irrelevant to win the Milly Maker, right? This is what Tony Pollard is. A good week for Tony Pollard is around 15. That is fine in redraft leagues. In redraft, he's been a fine pick. In daily fantasy, no interest. Nick Chubb, no interest. 7, again, his upside is 15. I have no interest in him hitting his upside. Woody Marks hasn't done it yet. He's somebody maybe later in the season we can consider, but not this week. Obviously, we got Nico. Nico did have a big week last week. Their O-line is just so bad. Calvin Ridley hasn't looked good. I like A.O. Manor has been solid. But still, he's hitting, ceiling games in the way I see it, and he's hitting 15-13, so that doesn't win us a Milly Maker. So he's usable, in redraft. And at his price, we can consider him as a punt play. Maybe he hits that outlier 20 spot, but I don't think it's likely. Chig was decent last week. Let's see, 6 targets, 5 for 66. At 3,500, he could be usable. We can mix him in here and there. Probably have interest in both defenses. Let's look at those matchups. So big advantage for pass rush versus pass block for Houston. Little advantage. So Houston seems like the better play, but the Titans at their price are definitely one that we could consider at 2,300 because they also have advantage in the pass rush. So do I get a little scared fading Nico in a somewhat favorable advantage matchup? Let's see what we've done so far. Nico coverage grade for Tennessee's been decent. Yeah, kind of lower end. Defense overall is not great. Maybe we do need to mix in some Nico. Yeah, they've just been really bad pass blocking. I think the lowest grade here. Maybe a little Nico. At 7,400, it just feels too much. If I'm going to do anything out of this game, maybe a little Nico, maybe a little Chig, but beyond that, not really interested. This next game is kind of sneaky. Carolina Panthers versus New England. Carolina Panthers ruined my dreams last week by shutting down Atlanta. But they didn't do really anything besides their defense that was worthy. That game was a real dud from a fantasy standpoint. Their offensive line has a disadvantage against the pass rush, but they have an advantage in the pass game and the receivers versus coverage, and kind of neutral in the run game. So not a great spot for Carolina, but it is one of the games that's rare where both offenses have a slight advantage. So that tends to set up pretty well for a likelier scenario for shootouts where it's back and forth game. Both defenses can't stop anybody. So it's kind of a sneaky game for me in that. Looks like it sets up better for the passing game than it does the run game. I think these grades probably are the run grade's probably pretty negatively impacted by the fumbles last week. So I think we might get to see a little bit of Travion. It's also hard here too, not a great matchup, and we don't know really what the snaps are going to look like. All three guys have had their struggles. Henderson's the most explosive, so honestly, I would probably mix him in to a couple lineups, but not a lot. Really, this is looking like a Drake May to Hunter Henry repeat week, and then Carolina maybe take some Tedero McMillan out of there. Maybe a little Chuba. Let's go look at pricing. So QB, May's cheap. Bryce Young is super cheap. Could be interesting, actually. We might be kind of on Carolina here, especially if Christian Gonzalez doesn't play, because the passing defense for New England has been trash this year. One of the worst coverage grades in the league. Chuba at 6K. Definitely interesting. We'll have him in the player pool. Travion Henderson is intriguing. He got more touches last week, but didn't really do anything with it, but didn't make too many mistakes. He had made mistakes in the pass blocking in previous weeks. 3 holding penalties in one game. Put him in the doghouse, but Ramondre Stevenson fumbling twice and Antonio Gibson fumbling once will help get the talented rookie out of the doghouse. So I think that there is some potential here. Obviously, we're not scared of Carolina's run D, although it has been better than what people were thinking early in the year. Pretty much here, like Tedero McMillan, I'll play across all lineups. Like he hasn't had that breakout yet, but it's coming. 8, 10, 9. He's going to have that 25 plus point game here sooner than later. Like this 10 for 100 and add a touchdown in there like that. That's coming. That's in the near future. So Tedero McMillan will have across all lineups. And then Jatavius Sanders sounds like he's out. Tommy Tremblay is super sneaky, but really, I think Hunter Henry is going to be a little bit more of a staple, and it looks like a good matchup for him this week. Go back over here. Just want to look at this a little more in depth on the grades. Both teams. Here we go. So both teams, Carolina struggles with pass blocking, but honestly, this is not as bad as most weeks for their pass blocking disadvantage. It's a little bit more of a neutral matchup for them compared to previous weeks. Big advantage in coverage. Yeah, New England has one of the lowest, I think the second lowest coverage grade. And then not great pass rush. This looks like a good environment for both Drake May and Bryce Young. So the two main pieces I would take out of this, like I think the most likely game stack that could happen here would be Drake May to Hunter Henry with the Tedero McMillan. Come back, mix in a little Chuba, mix in a little Bryce Young. Maybe a little bit of Hunter Renfrow. Let's go back over here. Renfrow at 3,800. Butte and Diggs. I'm out on Douglas, but Butte and Diggs are maybes. Definitely could build a couple Drake-like skinny stacks with one of each with both guys. Probably build around 10 Drake May lineups, somewhere in that ballpark. So maybe 2 or 3 with the wide receivers, but I think really the May to Hunter Henry remake or repeat of last week is the most likely outcome. The one I'm most interested in pulling out of this game. Also, we'll mix Henry across all lineups. Tedero McMillan I'll mix across all lineups. I'll mix in a little bit of Chuba across the board, and then a very small sprinkle of Henderson as well out of this game. This one could be a sneaky game that hits the over. I won't be smashing this game, but I'll be mixing in pieces, like I said, Tedero McMillan and Hunter Henry, the two main ones out of this game across the field. All right, next game, we have the Chargers versus the Giants. I think I'm in love with this Chargers offense. I feel very confident that they are going to have a top 5 guy at their position every single week. Last week it was Amari and Hampton, which was kind of the surprise. I was more on the Keenan Allen and receiver side, but Amari and Hampton was RB3. Keenan Allen was wide receiver 11 last week. I think pretty much every week you're going to see 2 of their weapons in this top 5 to 10 range. So I will be mixing in the Chargers across all lineups. They will be one of my core offenses. Pretty much will have a Charger in almost every single lineup. Like I said, I think it's very unlikely that one of those guys is not top 5 of their position. Let's look at these advantages. Just massive on the QB section. Their offense versus defense grade is a positive. Massive advantage in the passing game. Slight disadvantage in pass block versus pass rush. That grade kind of got beat up quite a bit, though, because of the Broncos pass rush. I think Nick Bonito is like a special player. And the Giants also have a very good pass rush. So it's just back-to-back weeks of tough pass rushes, bringing that grade down a little bit, and then being against a good pass rush. But really where the big advantage is coverage versus their receivers. So very low coverage grade for the Giants. We've seen that in the shootout game against the Cowboys. And then on the receiving grade for the Chargers, like their higher end, like mid-tier to higher end receiving game. So really going to be heavy on a slight advantage of the running game, but going to be really heavy on their wide receivers. And I will be pretty even across the board on McConkey and Quentin Johnston and Keenan Allen. People are losing faith in McConkey, but his big game's coming. Like, people right now are trying to take away McConkey. That's leaving openings for both QJ and Keenan Allen. Eventually, they're going to start to adjust and take away those big plays from Johnston, which is going to open it up for McConkey, and he'll start having some of those big games. So these three guys pretty much one of these guys will be in almost every single one of my lineups. I will be mixing in Omari and Hampton as well, especially at 5,900. That's pretty attractive in this matchup. So yeah, those four guys, pretty much all across all my lineups, I will have at least one of them in every lineup. Obviously, Herbert will be a core play for me. He's got to get 303 to give me a chance, but I think that's a possible scenario every single week with them now. They really have been throwing the ball quite a bit, and this is a much better matchup than what they had last week. So going to be very, very, very heavy on the Chargers offense this week. Also got a little mix in on Gadsden last week. Got a 9.6, so that's something we'll sprinkle into some of our Herbert lineups as a sneaky play. If you add a touchdown to this, then he's a top 5 tight end that week. Definitely got to mix in, especially if Disley is out. We'll keep an eye on Disley's status, but it looks like Gadsden's going to start mixing in a little bit, so we will mix him into some of our Charger lineups. All right, let's look at it from a Giants standpoint. Rough. One of the worst scores of the week. Bad across the board. To me, this feels more like just a Chargers beatdown type game, but Malik, we can always consider that 7K. It's in consideration. I'll mix him into a few lineups, but it's not nearly as juicy as a couple of weeks ago when they were playing the Cowboys. That was a lot more interesting, and we had a ton of Malik there. Wandale at 5K. Like, I know he only had 1 for 26. So, yeah. I think primarily I'm going to just be playing this from the Chargers side. Let's look at it for the Giants running game real quick, and then we can move on. Yeah, across the board, bad. So here we go. Slight advantage. So it's not too bad. Run game and Scatterboo. Going to get more volume with Tracy out. So Scatterboo is somebody we can mix in at 5,500 as well. But yeah, mix in a little bit. But for the most part, I'm just going to be Chargers in every lineup. That's one of my favorite spots of the week are the Chargers. They have a real solid score of 9 for the total overall advantage. Buffalo has a massive one, but we talked about how that might not be, although they have the huge advantage, it might not lead to huge fantasy day just because I think that game is going to be in control pretty quickly. All right, let's move on to a tough game to talk through as far as what we're going to do from a DFS standpoint. It's Tampa versus Philadelphia. We have 2 3-0 teams going into week 4. The matchup stats look tough for both offenses. Does not look like a spot that we want to touch at all. But this is kind of good on good defenses, good offenses. So lots of times when you have 2 capable quarterbacks like this too, it can be a sneaky game to turn into a bit of a shootout despite it being 2 good defenses. Nothing in the matchups points to that, though. It just is basically a completely neutral game. More than likely, this will be like one of those middling games where they're pretty close to hitting that 44.5. Maybe a piece or 2 comes out of it. You know, if they hit the 44.5, if they hit 44 points, there's probably 1 or 2 guys that comes out of this game that were usable or top 5, especially when you have guys as talented as Saquon Barkley and Bucky Irving and Emeka Egbuka without Mike Evans being there, and A.J. Brown or Devontae Smith. Like, those are all guys that are capable of having those boom weeks. We just saw it in what was seen to be a bad matchup for A.J. Brown, where he had a big week. So we can't discount these two teams, even though the matchups don't look great. That game is one that definitely has the capability of going off kind of out of nowhere. So we got to consider that. So let's look at pricing. Saquon's a little more affordable this week at $7,600. He'll definitely be one of the players I like. Bucky at $6,900 is also intriguing. Rachaad White, I will mix into especially some Baker lineups. With Mike Evans being out, I think White could pick up a little bit of pass work there as well. They're going to rely on Bucky more at wide receiver. I think Ibuka's role is going to stay pretty similar, actually, with Evans out, but he's been super solid. 14, 12, 23s, and 23.6. So 1 week that was really usable in DFS. Really looking for that 25 or more spot to really give us a chance at winning the Milly. So he'll be in at his pricing. He's probably won't be a core play, but he'll be in play. AJ Brown still being at 6,400 is too low, so we will continue to build him in a little bit. Devontae Smith at 5,400 is too low, so these two guys actually will probably be some core plays for me. The 3 Eagles guys will probably be core plays for me, and then I'll build some Jalen Hurts lineups. Primarily I think if Ibuka has a big day, then more than likely it's tied to Baker having a big day. So I'll probably just use Egbuka primarily in Baker lineups. And then we'll see if Godwin comes back. He might this week. I don't expect them to put a huge workload on him, though, when he first comes back. I feel like it'll be a little bit of a ramp up, although the circumstances might force their hand a little bit there. 6K, I'm probably out on that. Just coming off the injury, probably not going to be a big workload. Probably not going to be as explosive. Sterling Shepard, though, at 4K. 5 targets last week, 4 for 80. Yeah, that could be more the spot we're interested in. He's one that we can mix in across all of our plays. Goddard had a decent week last week. He could definitely be in our player pool. Cade Otton did nothing again last week, but with Evans being out, he's a sneaky one that we'll mix into some Evans lineups. Moral of the story on this game, I will build a few game stacks of this game. I do think there is a decent chance that if pieces come out of this game they really need, that it meant that the game goes off. So you could have one of those scenarios where you have like a Baker lineup where it's, Baker, Bucky, Egbuka, and Otton, like a big, like an onslaught there. Or maybe Egbuka and Sterling Shepard. And then you have the comeback of like Barkley and Brown or Barkley and Devontae Smith. Like, we'll definitely build a good chunk of those lineups. And then I will mix in the Philly guys, that core 3 of Barkley, Brown, and Smith across all of my lineups. They'll be one of my more core plays, those 3 guys, because it just feels like one of those 5 or one of those 3 pretty much every week is going to be in the top 10 and probably top 5. Like, they're going to just do just enough to win, but I think this is a week that they're going to get pushed the way the Baker's playing, even though they're a little short-handed. It just feels like he's keeping them in every game. And if this game requires them to score a lot of points, I think that they'll get pushed a little bit, and that could lead to bigger games for Brown. So, yeah, I like the game stack here. I like mixing in the pieces from the Eagles across all my lineups. And then for Tampa Bay, I'll mix in some Bucky across the field. I'll mix in some Egbuka across the field and some Shepard across the field. Beyond that, the rest of the pieces will primarily just be in Buccaneers stacks that I touch the majority of those. All right, on to our next game. Very interesting one with the Rams and Colts. Last week was all over the Colts and all over Jonathan Taylor. So there's a big hit there. This week, they do not have nearly as nice of a matchup as they had in the previous week. Very neutral, actually, when playing the Rams. But that was also the case last week for the Eagles, who played the Rams and had, obviously, QB1 and wide receiver 4. We can't just go off of just the matchups. Like, there's still other possibilities. So I like the core pieces of I'm going to like the core pieces of the Colts every single week. They played a good defense in the Broncos, but then they've had two pretty nice matchups outside of that. In week 1, they played the Dolphins, and then last week they played the Titans. So 2 cake matchups after one decently tough matchup, but they've showed up in all 3 games. So we'll be interested in them. But the Rams actually show pretty solid advantage across the board. They're one of the higher ranked offenses to target this week based on matchup advantages. Beyond pass rush, first pass blocking, and it is a big disadvantage there. But for the Rams, for whatever reason, that seems to be the case every single week because their pass blocking has been pretty bad. So for that reason, I'm probably not going to build many Matthew Stafford lineups, but I will go after the pieces of the Rams. The thing that's nice about the Rams is pretty much it's 3 guys. Like, you don't have to worry about anybody else. If anybody comes out of this game, it's going to be Puka or Devontae or Kyren. That's pretty much it. We don't have to go anywhere else. So those 3 guys I will mix across all of my lineups. It's nice when there's concentrated volume, especially concentrated volume with a good game environment. Indianapolis feels like a team that is actually legit. Like, they're not a fluke. I think that they are actually a very good team. They have very good skill players. They have a very good offensive line. They have a decent defense, not a great defense, so it sets up better for the likelihood of a shootout. I think this is probably the game, like the second most likely game to be that game that you have multiple players come out of. So I'll be playing the core 3 from the Rams, and I'll be playing the go-to guys on Indy as well. And the nice thing is they're still cheap. Like Jonathan Taylor, going to be a core player every week, despite that bad matchup. Hopefully will give us some leverage on the field. He can be running back 1 every single week, as we've seen, I think, the past 2 weeks. I think he was running back 1 in week 2 as well. And that was against a good defensive team in Denver. And then, so we're all over that. And we're going to play him every single week. And then they have their pass catchers, which are still very affordable. Pittman, Pierce has been mixed in a lot more than what I was anticipating. Downs at 4,100 is a steal, especially now that he's healthy. Mitchell at 3,100. If Pierce doesn't play, I will have Mitchell spread across lineups as well. 5 targets, 3 targets in every game. And he's a guy that lots of the time those targets are deep balls. So he could have a random spike week of 100 yards and a touchdown out of nowhere. So we will mix him in. We'll see. I think he's in concussion protocol, so we'll see if he's able to play this week. So keep an eye on that one. But all these guys are in play and will be spread across lineups, especially at these price points. This lets me buy into an offense that I believe in at a low price. So when I need that punt play, I have that Josh Downs of the world that I can mix in there. And if Adonai Mitchell becomes into play, if Pierce isn't playing, at 3,100, that's a great punt play off of a team that I expect to score 4+ touchdowns almost every single week and have 400 yards of total offense. They're a good offense. I want to have pieces of good offenses. Even in a neutral matchup, they are still likely to have a guy that is needed in DFS this week. So because of that, I will spread them across many lineups. And at tight end, Tyler Warren, still way too cheap at 4,600. Missed on him a little bit last week, but 9.75. I think this sets up as a better matchup than what he had last week. And they were just so far ahead that they didn't need to go at him. I think this game will be a little bit more of a back and forth. So I think that plays better for the pass catchers. So Tyler Warren will be one of, if not my highest owned tight end for a second week, even though he let me down last week, but still interested there. So I will be playing both of these offenses. I'll be playing across my entire lineup pool. Like, I will probably have a Colt and a Ram in one or the other in probably 90% of my lineups. Like, I believe in those pieces. I believe that top 5 guys will come out of this game from both offenses. And the Rams is just easy because it's 3 guys concentrated, makes it very easy. Indy a little bit more spread out, but you still know who they are and they're affordable pieces. So it will make it very easy to build lineups with those guys this week. Go back into the matchups data just a little bit. Want to just make sure we're not missing anything there. But yeah, good offensive environment besides the pass rush for the Rams, but they kind of deal with that every single week, and they seem to still have success. So give me Puka, give me Devontae, give me Kyron Williams. And then the Colts, neutral, but still a game environment where I think points are going to be scored. And one of the highest totals of the week, just under 50 points. So we are on that game. That is going to be one of our core plays. Let's move on to Jacksonville and San Fran. Oops. Let's look at our matchup stats here. So slight advantage at QB for San Francisco. I think we're going to get Purdy back this week. We'll look at his pricing and see if that's attractive. Running game, they actually have a disadvantage. But pretty much out of this game, you're pretty much looking at McCaffrey and Pearsall. Maybe Purdy. We'll see if Jawan Jennings comes back. Not a great matchup, but one that, depending on their pricing when we look at it here, is intriguing. San Francisco's at home, 46.5 point total, 24.5 team total. Those are all positives. If they get Purdy back, there's more upside. Jacksonville has been struggling, so that's part of why their grades are low. Running the ball, decent. San Fran's defense has actually been better than I think a lot of people anticipated. Look at this. Defensive grades. Yeah, I mean, they're anything above 70 is pretty solid. Poor tackling, but pretty solid everywhere else. So could be a little bit of a bounce back week for Jacksonville. This is pretty much what I think I'm going to do with this game is I will play pieces of McCaffrey. Like I will have them just cross the field, McCaffrey and Pearsall. At 5,700 is still too cheap. He hasn't really hit yet. I mean, he was solid last week, but 11, 6, 7 on the targets at his price point. And what I think will be a better environment with Purdy back in there. If he's in there, let's see what Purdy's price is at. 6,100. I'd like to see that a little bit lower. But pretty much it'll be McCaffrey and Pearsall that come out of this game for me. I'll use them a little bit across all lineups, but they're not like my favorite plays of the week. Whereas McCaffrey at 8,500, that's tough. Not really. Am I willing to fade McCaffrey completely? Maybe not. I think I still got to mix him in a little bit, but I will definitely be lighter than the field. The thing about McCaffrey, like, he went off last week, right? But at 8,200, he wasn't the right pick. Unless he does like a 40-point game, like he's right here, he's running back 4. But you have 3 guys that score more points ahead of him that were cheaper. And pretty much, even if he were to score like 26, like that's and be RB, if he scored 27, he was RB2. Like these other guys are still so close that the salary savings made them the better pick. McCaffrey has to go off and be RB1 by a chunk. Like if he was this 35 and Jonathan Taylor wasn't there, then that's a week where it's like, okay, paying up made sense. But that doesn't happen very often. It's not, we don't see in a lot of weeks where the expensive guy is RB1 and RB1 by such a large margin that you had to have them. Most of the time, even if they are RB1, it's close enough that you could have had the cheaper guy and that allowed you to build better lineups. So I might fade McCaffrey completely this week. Pearsall's a different story though, because as 5,700, that's just a really good number, a good value for the amount of targets he's getting. And if Purdy's back, I think that puts him in a better spot. Now, I will build somewhere between 3 to 6 Jaguars lineups, and that's pretty much all I'm going to do with the Jaguars this week. I'll build some scenarios that if they go off, I'm okay. Like I'm in a good spot. Like if Brian Thomas is wide receiver 1, more than likely that means that Trevor Lawrence is in that top 5 consideration. So I'll build some double stacks, some triple stacks with those lineups. So if that outlier outcome of them having that big that big week finally happens, I'll have lineups that would hit that and hit that hard, and then I'll mix that in with the offenses that I really believe in with the rest of the spots in the lineup. But beyond that, I don't really want to sprinkle these guys across my other lineups because they just haven't shown it yet. I do believe in Liam Cohen as a play caller. Last week is a tough matchup against Houston. It's a much better matchup, you would think, against San Francisco, although the stats show it's actually pretty neutral. So there is a chance that they go off. I think it's unlikely, though. So I will primarily just keep my plays with the Jags just to my stacks in this game, and I won't build a ton of them. Basically, just my Trevor Lawrence stacks. I'll build maybe 5 of those, and then the rest of them will be I will not just have this game besides Pearsall. I just won't touch it. All right. Now let's jump into the KC and Baltimore game. This one is an interesting one. Obviously, you have 2 Hall of Fame quarterbacks going at it, but interestingly enough, basically no advantage in this game for either team. Like, both negative setups for QB, slight advantage for the run game, a bigger run advantage actually for Kansas City. This is showing us that it's likely that this is going to be more of a slow-paced, low-scoring game. It looks like the defenses have the advantage here, but we know that this is Mahomes versus Lamar, and because of that, those 2 guys can always create an environment where it's back and forth. I think it sounds like Xavier Worthy's likely going to play this week, so that should be a boost to Kansas City. It looks like more of a neutral matchup for them besides the big run game advantage. Should actually be a 4 there. Interesting. So maybe we have some sneaky Pacheco that we mix in there. I don't really want to mess with Kareem Hunt, but that split makes it hard, even though we are seeing an advantage there that's sneaky. I could definitely see a game where Derrick Henry gets back on track. And then the hard part about these 2 teams for the passing game is it's not very concentrated. So, like, you have to use a ton of lineups to kind of, like, cover that net of players. Henry at 7,200, that's definitely a buy. We'll be in on that. I actually don't mind the Lamar and Henry stack. We saw that hit a few times last year where they were both top 5 at their position, which you don't think that would be correlated. But we've seen when they have big games that they are both having big games. Zay has been solid so far. Not much of a game last night. The Boom game was actually more of the outlier. Like, he's generally going to be more of like a 15 to 20 guy, which is solid in like redraft, but less interesting in DFS. Bateman has more of that like random upside of bigger games. And at 4,800, he's cheap to mix in. DeAndre has been in the mix pretty much every week. Not getting a ton of snaps or targets, but he's getting quality targets. Probably don't want to really mix him in that much. Walker's been getting a lot more time on the field, and Wallace, but not enough that we can do anything with. And then we got Mark Andrews coming back last night with a big game that we didn't really see coming. But put up that 27 spot. Andrews is always can always just have random blow-up games, but likely might be back this week. Keep an eye on that. Baltimore is tougher outside of Henry and Lamar. I actually like Andrews and Bateman the most of the other pieces as ones that are likely to have like that random top 5 week. But I don't have a lot of trust in that. So I'll probably keep that primarily just to game stacks of this game. Like, I think really if a guy comes out of this game that you need to have, I think it's maybe there's a scenario where it's like just a Derrick Henry game. He's like the only player that you need that comes out of there. But if like Lamar comes out of this game or Mahomes comes out of this game, which is possible, I think it's more likely a shootout. So like I'm going to build lineups to where that outcome occurs, to where like I'm playing like Lamar, Henry, Andrews, Lamar, Andrews, Bateman, like where he goes, Lamar has a 4 or 5 touchdown game, maybe one on the ground, or maybe has three passing touchdowns. Then Henry has 2 rushing touchdowns. 2 of them go to Bateman, 1 of them goes to Andrews. Like something along those lines where Lamar's QB1, Derrick Henry's QB or RB1, and then one of these tight end and wide receiver are in top 5 as well. And in that case, I would probably have I believe more in Baltimore than I do Kansas City, but I will mix in some scenarios where like Mahomes, Worthy Brown, Worthy Kelsey, maybe Worthy Gray, something along those lines. Thornton has also been like showing out when Worthy's been out. So we can mix in some Thornton, especially at that 4K. He's a guy that we could actually mix across all of our lineups. So I like Henry out of this game. He'll be one of my core plays. I will mix in more Pacheco than the field for sure. It's hard to believe in Hunt, but he is getting the goal line work. This makes it tough when it's split like this. It makes it a lot less likely that one of them is top 5. So for that reason, I think the guy that could be top 5 would be Pacheco. I think it's less likely it's Hunt. So I'll go more, maybe a little bit Pacheco. But basically, in this game, I want Henry. I'll take a little bit of Mark Andrews, a little bit of Bateman, unless I'm doing like saying this game is a shootout where I'm taking multiple pieces. The pieces I would want would be Worthy and Thornton primarily would be the 2. It's Brown do last week, 6 targets. Yeah. For the most part, I'm fading the Chiefs. Baltimore, Henry will be a core play. Bateman and Andrews will be mixed in, but not core plays. All right, last game and possibly my favorite game of the week is Chicago versus the Raiders in the late window. Maybe give us that late window hammer to take down the Milly this week. Let's look at the matchup stats here. This one is just screaming for a shootout. The 2 highest, tied for second at 11 overall points. That's all of their matchup advantages. Both have a disadvantage, where both of their defenses are in a compromised situation, which gives us the most indication of a shootout. If neither defense can stop each other and they're going back and forth, that creates that game environment where you get those huge scoring outputs that can win us a Milly Maker. So this game is going to be one of my core plays of the week. It will be spread across all of my lineups, which is interesting because you don't think of the Bears and Raiders as 2 teams that you want to have huge pieces of every single week. But I believe this week in both offenses having solid weeks and multiple players, 4 to 5 players being top 10 at their position coming out of this game. I really believe that is a high likelihood, huge advantage in the pass game for both offenses, pretty neutral to slight advantage in the run game. So I really like Geno. I really like Caleb Williams, and I like the pieces that go along with it here. So let's go to QB. Williams at 5,800. Smash spot will probably be QB1 for me this week, and hopefully we get the stack right this week. Chicago's defense is horrible too, so they're going to be in shootouts. Ben Johnson knows that and is going to be aggressive. I think he came out expecting that Cowboys game this past week to be more of a shootout than it was, but he came out aggressive, understanding that his defense is going to struggle. They're going to have to score points to win games. Feels like they're building confidence. Caleb Williams feels like he's building confidence. So, yeah, I'm going to ride this Bears train. I believe in it, and we'll have them across all of our lineups. Swift is the biggest weakness, I think, for that team. Monunga is starting to get more touches, 6 attempts, didn't really do anything with it. Swift, 13 attempts, 4 targets, 3 receptions. Decent day. Probably avoid this backfield just because of the split, and I'll focus more on the pass catchers. Odunze and Moore are still underpriced. Burden, killed us last week. These were our two biggest misses from last week. If we would have known, somebody could have gone back to the future and got the almanac and told us that Burden and Tucker were some of the highest scoring receivers, and Tucker being the highest scoring receiver last week, we would have been millionaires, but nobody told us. We thought it was Thornton. We thought we were the genius on Thornton, and we were just one guy away, one guy on the depth chart away. Very frustrating that we missed that when I was all over Thornton last week, but it is what it is. So Odunze and Moore are the core plays. Burden and Zacchaeus, we will mix in a little bit. Obviously, Burden showed us that he can be explosive. Went from 2 targets, 1 target to 3 targets, but had the appropriate amount. It's a frustrating miss. I don't think he's going to have many 100-yard weeks. He'll probably start getting more looks as the season goes on, but I'll still just have him in maybe 3 lineups this week. Not going to overreact to the outlier outcome. Had a few plays drawn up for him, though, and it feels like they'll continue to do that, so I don't want to fade him completely, but I think it's less likely that he continues to have weeks like that. He'll probably be more of a guy that is, 4 for 50 type, but with those random weeks that he hits a hundo and a touchdown like he did last week. So we'll mix him in, but not going to be a core play. Zacchaeus still got 4 targets last week. So we'll mix him in a little bit, probably the same as Burden, 2 to 3 lineups, somewhere in that ballpark. Loveland was starting to get work. I was on that one last week. When he came out of the game, got hurt. Sounds like he might play. I would actually kind of prefer that he doesn't. Then we could be on Komet. If he does play, it gets a little harder to pick one of these guys. Yeah. If Loveland plays, we'll mix in some Loveland. If he doesn't, we'll mix in some Komet. Now on the Raiders side, Gino at 54, he'll be in play. Genty at 6,200, he'll be in play. It feels like they might be tipping something because he's just getting hit in the backfield every single time he touches the ball. But he's such an explosive guy. I think that they've got to start making an adjustment. Let's look at the matchup. Yeah, run blocking versus run D, but let's see where Chicago, I think, is one of the worst in run defense, so it could be like a get better spot. So Chicago is awful in coverage, one of the lowest grades in coverage. Bad tacklers, below average in run defense. So it feels like this is a spot for Genty to get right. He will be one of my core plays. He will be a sneaky core play too, I think. So out of this game, I like taking Genty plus a receiver or a tight end. With Bowers at 5,800, he's more achievable this week. Hasn't had like that week you have to have, so probably will help ownership a little bit with him not having a big week yet. 5,800, he's more usable, so I like the stack of Genty and Bowers, even when I'm not doing Geno lineups. That feels like in a lineup where the offense still has success and you have 2 guys that could be top 5, like that feels like that could be a combo that doesn't necessarily lead to Geno. Like if Geno has a good day, the matchup shows. One of the things I think it's important to point out too is when we're looking at these weeks and it's like, oh wow, they have really good QB matchups. A QB can still have a real life good NFL day and it not be good enough for us in DFS. So we want to be building towards scenarios where there's not much of a difference where a guy throws for 303 touchdowns or 4 touchdowns compared to when a guy has 300 yards and 2 touchdowns. Like both are very successful days, but only like 302 doesn't get us the Milly Maker win. So in a scenario where he throws for 302 and they score 28 points, like that's a scenario of where likely the running back got 2 touchdowns and then a receiver got 1 or 2 touchdowns or a tight end got 1 or 2 touchdowns. So that running back plus a pass catcher is a really nice way to stack up games where it looks like the quarterback / the offense has a good advantage, because that can play out lots of times. Just because it's a good advantage doesn't mean that a guy is going to have a huge fantasy day. He might have a successful NFL day that leads to fantasy success to other guys on his team. So we want to be building both scenarios where he has that outlier day and hits the 4 touchdowns, and we want to be building lineups where he has like more of a average day, but a successful day, but brings weapons along with him. So we're even stacking the quarterback when we're not stacking the quarterback, if that makes sense. Ginty and Bowers are going to be more core plays for me this week. And I'll run like Ginty and Myers lineups, Ginty and Tucker lineups, Ginty and Thornton lineups outside of stacking this game. I'll do it in other lineups as well. Tucker, like he's been getting looks. I should have seen this. Like this was my big miss, is like he's got 8 targets. He didn't do anything with them, which was like my philosophy on like he really has never done anything with them. But still getting that many targets in a good matchup. I should have been on this. I was just so locked in on Thornton, thinking that he was finally going to break through because he had more upside than Tucker does as an athlete. But Tucker is very fast, and he seems like he's figuring stuff out against zone. He can't get off of press coverage. Like I listen to reception perception, I hear that a lot of stuff like he just isn't good at, but he is good at some things, and that's just being super fast and they're getting the ball in his hands. So even though he might not be like a top echelon NFL receiver, he can still have some fantasy weeks for us. Sad we missed it last week, but we'll mix him in a little bit this week, and we'll also mix in a little bit of Thornton as well. But primarily, the primary guys that we'll be pulling out of this are going to be Ginty, Myers, and Bowers, and we'll do our share of Geno lineups as well. So that's one of my favorite games of the week. Let's do a quick just recap of where the big advantages are. Overall, biggest advantage is Buffalo, but that game environment might kill some of the action there, but we love our boy James Cook out of that. Then we got the Raiders and Chicago tied. We're going to have those offenses spread across many lineups, including game stacks there, with and without quarterbacks. We will be all over the Chargers. I will have a Charger in every lineup. That is my pledge to you. In week 4, I will have a Charger in every single lineup. That's the way I like it. You can't tell me any different. There will be a top 5 player at their position that comes out of this game that is on the Chargers. So Chargers will be there. We'll have plenty of the Rams. I like that game. That's probably my 3rd favorite game of the week. In between the Rams and the Colts, I will have pieces from both of that. And the Rams are very easy to pull those pieces out of because there's really only 3 guys that have the potential to be needed in a DFS lineup to win the Milly Maker. So I love that. Easy decisions. Can spread them across all of my lineups. San Fran, really not a great matchup. It's more just coming off of their Vegas total. More of a neutral matchup, so it won't be as heavy on them, but we'll mix them in a little bit. KC, also a lot of it is coming from their Vegas total and their run game advantage. So interesting, but not too interested. Atlanta is our sneaky one. I like that we can pretty much get it to 4 players. So Bijan will be a core play. Drake London will be the chorus of plays. I will not give up on you, Drake London. I will not give up on you. You will have a big week this week. That goes for you too, Lad McConkey. I understand your top 5 week is coming, and I will bet on it this week, and you will make me a millionaire. That is what is going to happen. There is no other way. So Atlanta will mix in. We'll mix in some Hunter Henry and some Drake May out of New England. Baltimore, interesting, kind of a weird matchup, but we'll get some Derrick Henry. We'll get some Mark Andrews. And we'll mix in a few pieces here and there. But yeah, those are the core plays. Going to be a lot of James Cook, a lot of Ginty Myers and Brock Bowers, a ton of Caleb Williams, a ton of Roma Dunze, a good amount of DJ Moore, and maybe one of their tight ends, a ton of Amari and Hampton, a ton of Lad McConkey, a ton of Keenan Allen, a ton of QJ, a ton of Kyron, a ton of Puka, and a ton of Devontae Adams. That's really our core plays. And then beyond that, we got Indy down here with Jonathan Taylor and Tyler Warren will be key plays for us every week. That is where we're going to be focused this week. Let's build a lineup and get out of here. I'm just going to go ahead and we will build I'm going to do a Justin Herbert lineup. Where is that? Chargers. There we go. So we're going to pull the Chargers into this. We are going to pull James Cook into this. We are going to pull this Indianapolis and Rams game into this. So these are the core attacks of the week. We're going to put a lineup together with all of those offenses going off. Now, hopefully, we build the one with the correct combination. So we'll get started with Herbert. See if we can build something with Cook and Taylor at running back. I don't know. We'll see if we have enough available to do anything there. So we'll go a little bit cheaper at receiver since we kind of went aggressive at running back. I believe in you, lad. We're gonna go DJ Moore week. We're gonna go down here to Keenan Allen to get our double stack out of this. Now we need this could be if we go tight end. So it's going to be hard to do anything with Bowers in this lineup just because of how much we spent at running back. So let's actually do this. Let's actually take Taylor out of here and say this is going to be the Tyler Warren week. He's cheaper at tight end. And then at running back, we go to Genty. So that gets us our Bears and Raiders game stack there with Genty and Moore. And then we need to dive into defense a little bit more. Let's do that, actually. That's where we missed so bad last week. Looking back through it, there really wasn't anything that was a good indication of a big week. Everything on Minnesota's D was showing that it was going to be a bad week. And same thing with Carolina. So there weren't any metrics that gave it away for us. Let's look at what Detroit is going to cost. They're very expensive, so that would give us $4,900 to work with. We can make that happen, but let's look for a cheaper defense. Buffalo, that does feel like it's going to be more of a blowout type game. Buffalo is the most expensive. Texans are also going to be they're going to be expensive as well. Indy against the Rams, Philly against Tampa Bay. Cleveland will be cheap, but playing Detroit, good on good in Detroit. Browns are like the cheapest D, but that is a tough one. Jared Goff is known to turn the ball over here and there, though. So we'll mix the Browns in. Mix them in. We did see the Chargers. We did see a lot of defenses match up with the running backs last week. So maybe we go with that. I don't want to let's see. Just walking through these without the metrics. 49ers, Jacksonville has struggled. New England against Carolina. But the Patriots have struggled. Commanders, they're in the same spot that Carolina was in last week. But I do believe Atlanta will do better. This week, the coverage grade is just so bad. But we could probably mix them in a little bit. Philly, don't love it against Tampa, but Baker can turn the ball over here and there. The Rams against Daniel Jones. Obviously, Daniel Jones against pass rush in the past has had issues, but that offensive line has been a lot better, and he's got so many weapons. I think it's unlikely that there's a huge boom game from the Rams from a defensive standpoint. The Bears defense sucks. We think it's a get-well game for the Raiders. We're kind of betting against this game being a slow game, being a defensive battle, so I don't really want to put them in other lineups if that's what I'm betting on throughout the week. Chiefs, that could be sneaky against Baltimore. Lamar can turn the ball over for sure. Henry all of a sudden has a fumbling problem. Maybe the Chiefs. Buccaneers against Philly, they don't really turn the ball over. Atlanta, maybe against Washington, especially if Mariota plays. That's a maybe. Ravens against KC. Raiders against Chicago, we don't love. Panthers against New England. Maybe that's our spot. Maybe Drake May can turn the ball over. They had all sorts of fumbling issues. They turned the ball over a lot last week. Panthers got turnovers last week, even though it still looks like a disadvantage for them. Jacksonville is actually pretty cheap at this price. San Fran hasn't been world beaters by any means this year. We'll go with Jaguars to start here. Let's go actually back in Giants against the Chargers. I don't hate that, even though we are big on the Chargers. The Giants pass rush at this number we can mix in. We don't want to do it here against our Herbert lineup. So that gives us 5,900. We'll work with that. We won't play the Saints at all. We'll mix in some of the Browns. Titans. Maybe the Titans. Maybe that's our spot. Because Houston's offense has just looked horrific. Yeah, that's where we're going to go. We're going to go Titans. I think they're going to be probably our core play on D this week. And hopefully we don't get freaking hosed by the defenses again this week. Hoping defense 1 scores 15 points this week, not 30, and absolutely kill us like it did last week. If it is 30, we hope it's the Titans because that's going to be our core play. All right, what do we got here at our flex play? So we want to pull back in all of our offenses that we're attacking here. And Chargers. Okay. 6,100. So Amari and Hampton. Fitz. Bowers fits. And we just missed on Odunze. That'd be nice. Devontae or Odunze would be really nice to fit in here. Do we want to go with... Oh, no, we can't go with the Browns. I thought I could get the Browns in there. Doesn't quite work. So we'll put the Titans back in here. Teteroa McMillan. That's an interesting name there. Like we could go to Bowers as well. Go a 2 tight end lineup. Get a little bit of leverage on the field with the Warren and Bowers. I think Teteroa McMillan's more likely to have that 100 yards and a touchdown type game than Bowers is. So therefore we'll go with McMillan in this lineup. So we got our core of our Chargers. We got our core of the Bills game that we're pulling this week in James Cook. We got our Raiders and Bears stack with Genty, DJ Moore. Yeah, it's just a skinny stack there. And then we got our Chargers double stack, with Herbert, McConkey, and Keenan Allen. And then we have the Titans, which just feels good against CJ Stroud. Houston has basically sucked this year on offense. So that's the bet we're going to make. There's our first lineup of a week, and there's $1 million. All right, my friends, appreciate you tuning in. Good luck this week. We will have our player pool video out tomorrow afternoon. Feel free to ask questions in the comments. Smash that subscribe button. Go over, check out the channel. We've got quite a few videos up. Sorry, we'll go back to the channel here. Got quite a few videos up. Got a recap from last week, looking at what we did right, what we did wrong from week 3. But I will be building a player pool breakdown video tomorrow, and then we'll go over cash and our bankroll strategy later in the week. Appreciate y'all for tuning in. Help spread the word of the channel. Ask questions in the comments, and I'll answer them in the next video. As well as feel free to send me questions at millymakermaniac@gmail.com. Thanks for the support, guys. Good luck this week, and we will see you tomorrow.